Croeso, welcome. You are now part of our AI discussion forum with our industry panel. My name is Brett Aggersberg. I work at the University of Wales, Trinity St David, and I also work with the festival team. We want this to be a really interactive session, so please feel free to ask questions. At various points I'll kind of lean out to you and see if anyone has anything they want to contribute or find out more about. But we're joined by Simon Howlett from the festival. We also have Robin Moore from Media Cymru and Tracy Spottiswoode from Film Cymru. So first of all, warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining this panel and taking part in it. We're going to be talking about AI. We're going to be hopefully very open and interesting conversation about where we're possibly going with it and what kind of issues we face. Obviously there's concerns around AI, but we can discuss potential benefits and other things as well. So really first off, I think just to make sure that everyone's sort of on board with what we're talking about here, we're not going to give a full lecture on AI. We can't possibly do that. But hopefully most of you have become aware in one way or another of how AI is impacting what everybody does, but particularly within the creative industries and what we do within film. So I wonder if, maybe starting with you, Tracy, are you able to sort of define what we're talking about today in terms of AI, what that means to you and Film Cymru?
Well, it's a broad question really, because it's a bit of a jungle out there still, and there are lots of tools that filmmakers can use, through development, pre-production, production, post-production, and sales and marketing. And there are, I guess, different levels of AI. So you might use something that, like ChatGPT, which can be helpful in generating ideas, but you have to be very discerning with it, because there's a lot of facts that are incorrect that it throws up. And then you might have something, say, in post-production, which helps you with the colour grading and the sound design. You might have something in pre-production, which helps with the budgeting and scheduling. There are now apps, I think, which will you can use to visit a location remotely, or the location scout can go there and scan it in LiDAR, for example, and you can then, remotely walk around it, so to speak. So there are lots of tools, and we're not talking about, AI robots or that kind of thing. It is essentially tools which we're talking about in filmmaking.
Okay, that's really helpful, thank you. And for you, Robin?
So Media Cymru are particularly interested in innovation within the media sector. So I'm an innovation consultant for Media Cymru, so I don't talk on behalf of them in terms of their general policy, but in terms of the work we do to support people, obviously, if you'd imagine, innovation often comes from people trying out new technology. It's not what people buy, that's what's useful, that's not necessarily the technology, but it starts with the technology often, and AI is frankly the big thing. In terms of, it used to be like 5 years ago, I'd be buying kit, virtual reality headsets and green screen kit and things like that, and now it's pretty much all software licenses to various different, because there are so many different tools out there. And I think what's interesting for us is trying to balance optimism and cynicism. So it's being careful about all the things that are bad about AI, while trying to use all the possible opportunities, while accepting that this is an oncoming storm. It is a period of change that we're going to go through, and you have to pick your battles if you don't want that change. We can't just be anti as a whole. We have to work out, what is it good for, what is it not good for, what do we not want to see, and how do we mitigate, how do we control those things. And one way I like to look at AI in this context, in the creative context, is see AI generally when we're using it as an engine for changing modality, by which I mean it changes one thing to another thing. It might be from text to speech, text to image, text to video, image to video, and you'll get a lot of this in the models. They use the number 2 instead of the 2. But in that modality change, that can be actually literally changing, whether it's audio or video, it could be changing the style or the format. We're doing that because it helps us move things along the production process. It helps us put something into a more convenient form, maybe to edit it, or that we can optimize it, we can automate it in some way, and we're using that to help us go along. But every time we do that, the bit in the middle is it's taking our content, putting it into what they call latent space, and the space inside the AI engine, which is just numbers. That's all it's doing. It doesn't understand the world. It's just changing it into a form that's numbers, and then it decodes it back into another form. And that's useful to us because we're changing forms. Maybe you're taking poetry and turning it into prose, or fact and turning it into fiction in terms of deep fakes. But that bit in the middle does a whole load of other things that are unintended consequences. And so our main thing at the moment is trying to get people to think about what are those unintended consequences. And those may not just be they change the content in a way we didn't want. I don't know if you've heard hallucination or bias, things like that. But they can be bigger issues where they degrade trust, or potentially they are biased in a way that could have a massive social change. So we have to kind of be aware of where are these consequences when we're developing these new tools, because that's very much where we're at. We're interested in developing new things with AI, but where are those consequences, and how do we make sure we're being careful as we go along to look out for them?
Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting. Lots of things I think we can probably riff off of that in terms of the conversation and where we go next. And so for you, Simon, in terms of filmmaking and independent filmmakers, particularly that the festival's supporting, but how do you for you define AI within film, and what's your current thought process on it?
It's something that actually, in fact, we've talked as the festival team quite a lot about, because the impact of AI has been so dramatic, literally in the last 18 months. We have been very dynamic at how we meet that, and so with a lot of thought and discussion has gone into it. And really, but also from a personal creative point of view, it's actually fairly easy from my personal point of view, and actually from the point of view of the festival. We're here to showcase the creatives, with the human beings. That's what we do. There have always been tools. There's always been innovation. There's always been development, and people have had to retrain. And then they've learned to, even in my own lifetime, I've gone from editing on Steenbeck tables, 16 mil, all that sort of stuff, right through to tapes, even then, carrying around a 1 gigabyte block around Soho, around five production houses, because it was so expensive back in those days, as Avid was coming in and all those different things. So, there's always been those tools, those ways of actually making the whole creative process more cost-effective, more streamlined, and it's added creativity. It's enhanced the whole artistic expression and conversation with the audience. The risk, personally, I think we have now is we have something that is no longer just a tool. It's something that we're being asked to train, and we're being asked to train it to replace us. And because AI doesn't create, it recycles. So and if we get to a point, okay, we could argue that that it could be started creating for itself, but it's always going to be creating what we've put in, and we've already been asked by our powers that be. Shall we say, we've been asked by our powers to be to help in that process. Well, personally, I don't see why we should actually. I think that, yes, there are places for a tool, but it shouldn't replace a human being, and it should never replace human creativity. Never.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good viewpoint. And I think the next thing I wanted to kind of start looking at really was, I think it's a tricky question, but where are we in terms of looking at, in the industry now, the assisting versus replacing kind of dichotomy and kind of balance and struggle that maybe some people are feeling. Is that something that you're finding with filmmakers at the moment? Are they kind of looking at purely as an assistant tool, or are they kind of thinking actually longer term budget wise it's actually going to be cheaper and they can replace more people? I mean, where do you see it going, and what concerns are you hearing from people? Are you okay?
Yeah, I mean perhaps it's useful if I read out Film Cymru's position on it. It's complex, but we recognise that AI, including generative AI, creates huge opportunities for the growth of the UK economy. Within our sector, we acknowledge it creates opportunities for filmmakers across the production chain. It can drive productivity, but the drive shouldn't come at the expense of those working in the creative industries. And copyright and the ownership of copyright is the lifeblood of a sector that contributes significantly to the economic and social good of the country. So we're not supportive of text and data mining that would allow AI companies to train their models on material owned by people who have the copyright over their work. And we're very mindful of the potential impact on individual creators, and we're supportive of work that's been undertaken by BFI and certain sectors in government to strengthen the existing copyright framework. I think that the current bill is very concerning, which is looking at allowing tech companies to use the work of creatives without their permission. They might have to proactively, opt out of it, but that creates a difficult situation when a lot of creatives don't actually own the copyright, or it might be licensed to third parties. As Baroness Kidron said in the House of Lords recently, we don't own it, so we shouldn't be selling it for free. So I think there are lots of ethical considerations and also environmental. That's not spoken about very much. The incredible amount of energy that AI uses in the data centres, and I think it's predicted that globally data centres will consume the same amount of water as Denmark in a year. When you're thinking, that a lot of the world doesn't have access to water, that's a really big kind of an environmental concern as well. I think it is here, and we have to try and look at how we use it, how we can use it ethically, environmentally, in an environmentally friendly way, and a lot of the sort of information that I'm going by has been from Dr. Angus Finney's recent research paper for Synergio, which is a membership organisation of regional funding bodies and across Europe, and he calls it human in the loop, and how essential it is that the human being, the creative, is at the centre of the creative process, and the AI doesn't take over. So I guess it's how we do that.
Definitely, very similar things in there. It's a challenging discussion to have because there are a number of pressures simultaneously. There are pressures from the individuals and how they control their creative process, and maybe not wanting to change their creative process because that's a painful process to go through. But there's pressures from outside, from other media forms that will use it quickly, and there'll be pressure from the younger generation who aren't thinking about it in the same way. They're thinking about, I can make a film on my own now. No bugger would fund me before. And now I can actually do it. And you can do the whole film pretty much sitting at your desk. Now, people are already doing this. They call them machinima, using computer game graphics to make films. And that stuff's getting better. Better to the level where we know that big games like The Last of Us end up becoming TV series. The Witcher, a lot of the big franchises actually recently have come from the computer games industry. So we have to be aware that there are these pressures coming from outside the core film industry of how to do these things. And it is very complex. I've been picking up on the green issue, there's always two sides to this sort of stuff. So your personal use of AI is more likely to have that impact than our film use of AI. And actually, the streaming of programs is using up a lot more bandwidth than the AI is using up at the moment. And that's part of the reason data centers are growing so quickly. So you've got this slightly mixed up kind of world where it's actually quite hard to identify these things for us as individuals. And unfortunately, my tendency is to go, you kind of have to assume this stuff's going on around there. It'll go through the House of Lords, but EU have already said they can train data and you get an opt-out. So actually, is it going to affect them much? Runway, one of the companies that do one of the better video tools, they basically paid Lionsgate for the whole of the back catalogue. So they're really going to be interested in your content to do the training on, but they've got that already. So actually, there's some things where us worrying about how they affect us in these ways aren't actually going to affect our future. How we use the tools are, whether or not there are particular things that particular tools do that you think, that actually gets in the way of the creative process. That takes the human out of the loop, and we need to fight that. And so it's really picking your battles and being very, very clear on this is the bit we don't think it's good at. We don't like, and personally this is one of my things, I don't like the idea of tools that are a magic button. I want a movie that does this, click, and it does the edit. It does all the camera work, it does all those things. I like the tools that allow me to do something different within my space and creatively take a vision that's in my head, that's the human, and put it onto the screen. That makes sense to me. And it's trying to a little bit fight against particularly businesses that are wanting to just go, actually, we don't need a real editor to do this. We're just going to use this. And at the moment, it'll be rubbish what they come up with anyway. So there were other, there are editorial and creative reasons why we wouldn't use it. But that's the stuff that we maybe need to be careful about. Is those people who think this is our route to a quick buck. We're going to basically use AI to optimize everything, rather than the people who are saying, actually, AI, that's new creative ambitions, that's whole new audiences, that's actually being able to monetize something I perhaps couldn't monetize before, because I can translate it or I can change it into different formats. There's sorts of things that we'd love to be able to do to hopefully mean that we could do more of what we love. And I suppose that it is that difficulty. So we're seeing people start to play at the edges. We're trying to make those tools, but it's quite hard sometimes to go, yeah, but that one, actually, are you just optimizing? Are you just cutting people out? This one, maybe so. I've got a good example, actually. A project I'm involved with from a company called Apod. They're looking at lip syncing to dubbed material. So you take a film, you want it to play, say the film was in Welsh, it's not going to play well in the US because the US audience don't like subtitled material much. I wouldn't be surprised if they like subtitling less than they like AI, because 44% of people told Netflix and Netflix audience say that they're quite happy to watch an AI film, a complete film made by AI, which is really scary. And there's probably less than those who will be willing to watch a foreign film in subtitles.
The AI films that have come out have been absolutely banned.
I know, and yet they say, oh, I'd be happy to watch one. Which so it's not it's the audience thing isn't the issue. The issue is all about quality. But with so we're looking at lip syncing subtitling, so that you could basically change the voices in some things, so you change the language, but actually the lips move perfectly, so you can not tell that it was originally filmed in another language. Load of ethical issues if you do anything factual, works better in the drama space. But the way that the company, Apod, looked at that is they didn't look at it as this is a way of getting rid of actors or getting rid of. They went, well, actually, we still need performers. We still need dubbing artists. This is a possibility to make more work for dubbing artists because we can suddenly sell to completely new audiences. So this is something that the dubbing artists wouldn't have been doing. The lip sync is the minor bit. The lip sync is, okay, there's someone who's getting repeat fees anyway, so they'll still get paid for it. And what they've been doing is looking at that, who gets paid for what, so we make sure they do get paid. And possibly this is something where more people will see it. And hopefully that means more monetization. We can put it on a platform like Netflix that you might not be able to put it on otherwise. And that's an opportunity. But that's partly down to the company looking at it from that idea of how do I keep the human in the loop?
Yeah, and I guess the issue with that would be whether you have a company who doesn't have that kind of attitude and they're thinking we can get AI generated voice and just put it onto the actors, so you're not employing a lot of dubbing artists.
Yeah. And there'll be many, it'll be less, it will be the companies to start off with, and then hopefully that's the sort of area where unions come in and go, stop it, as happened in the States with the Writers Guild. Because the Writers Guild came up with they got a good deal out of that, in that basically they protected money they earned. They didn't say you couldn't use AI, but we're still the boss. You can use AI if us as a writer say you can use AI, you still pay us the same rate. You don't pay us less. So they kind of got that right. Yeah. So if we can do that, but I'd say the main issue is going to be everyone on TikTok's using it. All your students are coming up having been used to this idea that they can internationalise their content, and suddenly you've got an issue with a mismatch of the desire to use AI where some people just see it as a creative opportunity to improve their skills and make themselves more employable. And then you've got an old guard that will be going, oh, don't do that. That's actually impinging on my expertise. And so I'd say that it's often when we get into skills conversations, I'm not so worried about the students. I'm actually worried about the people in the middle. If you're towards the end of your career, great, just carry on doing what you're doing, because you'll be doing it for ages. It'll take a while for this to happen. But it's the bit in the middle that I think is more, because AI won't take your job. Somebody using AI will take your job. Because there'll still have to be someone who's going, I'm going to use that virtual voice and I'm going to direct that virtual voice. Because you still need directing it. You still need to script it. And it's quite hard to get a good performance out of it anyway, which is why you should just using a performer, because they've got all the skills. I don't have the skills. But I agree, it's that some people will come and try and do this, but you've got to work out which bits don't we want them to do and how do we lobby that. We can't just go, AI is bad for the industry, because it's coming anyway.
Yeah,
You know?
and I think a lot of training is needed, isn't it? You know, I got a background in animation, stop motion animation, and I would have given my IT for a way to speed that process up, because it took me about 10 months to shoot, to animate a 13-minute film. And there is a tool now, an AI tool, where it will take the keyframes from your puppet and give you the in-between shots. So that would save a lot of time. But I guess at the moment there aren't enough kind of rules and regulations around the ethical considerations and bias and that kind of thing.
I think training is the key issue. It's how to take the skills that you might have, your years and years of experience of editing, and go, well, actually, someone still needs those skills to be able to tell an AI what to do. So rather than them trying to train it on you, if you like, it would be better to just go, well, there is going to be a human in the loop, so we don't need to train it to do that bit, because the chances are it's not going to be very good, you know.
For the time being. But also the thing is, how many of you haven't heard of Good, Bad and the Ugly? You know, Good, Bad and the Ugly, and any of this spaghetti westerns, they're famous because they're out of sync. You know, in fact, that became one of the marketing points and the reason it kept going. It became part of the whole creativity and the whole genre. So, you know, the fact is, yes, you could, any company or any government can turn around and use all of these arguments, but they're, in the end of the day, yes, there's the argument about the technology, and that's absolutely fine, and we need the regulation and all that sort of thing. But there's also always going to be about the creativity and the creatives, and you know, let's keep supporting that and keep championing that, because otherwise the artists aren't going to find the funding they need. They're struggling as it is anyway, and if it's all going to become TikTok videos, how are all these people here going to be making their films? And so, you know, if there isn't a voice speaking out for the creative and for the artist and supporting that, and having places like the Carmarthen Bay Film Festival championing that, you know, we're you know, it's what do they call it? They call it a Judas goat. So you know the Judas goats,
Yeah.
where in the abattoirs, so it's the one animal that can walk through and takes all the others through. All the others stay there. They get slaughtered, and that's the one that walks through. Well, we can all say yes, it's a good tool. Yes, it is a tool, but let's also recognise what it is also, and it is being replaced. It's not just in the creatives. I'm having conversations with people in local government that are told that they're going to be replaced by AI in 5 years. They've been told that now, and it's creating a great deal of stress and worry, and because how are they going to pay to support their families in what's, you know, the so-called cost of living crisis we're having at the moment. So not just creatives, you know, this is something that's impinging upon all aspects of our society, and I think we really need to be concerned, because the governments on the global scale are all pushing for this. It doesn't matter if you're in Europe, it doesn't matter if you're Trump or Starmer or EU or whatever, or China, it's going to happen. But if we don't speak out as the creatives, who's going to? And it'll all be too late.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point. It brings me on to what I was going to start looking at next, really, which was about the idea of ethics and democratization as well. I think we've seen with things like YouTube and social media over the last 20 years, democratization in that sense has worked quite well for creatives who've been able to make a start in their careers and then get picked up because of the quality of the work. But it feels almost, and I don't know if you want to discuss this a little bit, but democratization's almost got messy within the AI era, because actually a lot of it's behind a paywall. And so we have discussions, we'll come on to ethics maybe later on, but we have discussions about, okay, what access do students have, as an example, to AI, and when they're trying to put together a piece of creative work and they don't have enough money to pay for co-pilots or whatever it might be, then are they at a disadvantage? If everyone's being measured against the same thing but someone's got more toys than the other one, it's very hard, I think, to judge that creativity. And I wonder if you want to comment on the democratization and the kind of situation we're currently in. Is there a way forward? Is there a way of maybe looking at this in the future? So do you want to go first, Robin?
So very clearly, democratisation of, we call it democratisation of broadcast, but the same as showcasing films, the same issue. I was at the BBC when all that sort of stuff was going on. And I would say at the time, people were saying a lot of the same things. Everyone was really worried for their jobs. And actually, it pretty much decimated the newspaper industry, that period of time. So these technologies always do create that change. And when we look back, we kind of forget some of the pain. That happens, and I could go all the way back to the invention of the camera, and none of us go, it shouldn't have been invented, but you look at the history there, and they were saying all the same things we say now, which is why I really get down to the believe in the creative agenda. What do you want to do creatively, and what are you going to fight? Don't worry about the stuff you can't control, because it's already gone too far. The horse is bolted, if you like. But in terms of my worry is more actually social media coming off the back of YouTube has created a social change that I think AI is going to very negatively emphasize or exaggerate. We have lost the idea of trust. And a lot of photographers say that actually the iPhone has already killed photography before you started having text to image. Because so many people are taking images, there's so many images out there, actually, it's very hard now to see what is a good photographer or not, and the market is very difficult now. So I do think that AI is going to really add to that and is really going to erode trust. The hope is that will mean people will move back towards more traditional platforms for certain sorts of experiences. I don't know if that's overly optimistic. I hope we'll all want humans more because we talk to computers too often. But I don't know whether that's actually going to come out. There's some surveys that claim it, but it's one of those things where you get a few either way sort of thing. But definitely, there is obviously a core issue there that what is truth becomes difficult. We lose our ability to use aesthetic to judge truth, where it used to be the amount of money that was piled into something would tell you whether it was truth or not, and now we can't do that because it's so easy to cheaply make anything that looks, whether it's a news broadcast or a high-end VFX, you can make anything look like anything, pretty much. I mean, I've got deep fake demos that I can do to try and show people how easy it is to be scammed, but they're literally practically live. I continue into celebrity in front of an auditorium, and that really hammers it home how easy, and that's just on a gaming computer, it's running a free bit of software from some dodgy website, but that really makes you, end of truth. Similarly though, a lot of drama makers are going, wow, I never thought I could make an alien film in South West Wales, not where we actually see the alien, which is not always the best thing, but now you can. There are tools out there. There's a wonderful tool called from Wonder Dynamics that's just been bought out by Autodesk, where it literally it motion captures off your actor. So you have a normal actor in the scene, motion captures of it, pops the 3D model in, tries to like the 3D model. Yeah, you really want to do a bit more visual effects, I think, but it's $100 a month, which is outside your students' thing. But actually, it's $100 a month for something that would have cost you 50,000 plus, per minute. And now you've got something where you can fill your boots for a month and make a whole load of these things. And so there are some things that actually, if you looked at it just from the creative, particularly if you're more into drama filmmaking, it's actually, I can now do things I couldn't do before. And I definitely hope that people will be trying to look for those opportunities, because just as photography may have killed off certain art forms that there were at the time, people who did etching postcards, literally in a couple of years, no more etchings on postcards. They were all photographs. So you think that's a lot of people, but a lot of people swap from being an etching studio to being a photographic studio. And so there's this bit where you have to move quite quickly. But without the invention of the camera, we wouldn't have had Impressionism, we wouldn't have had the modern movie, And so you kind of got all these things, and there's a bit of me that's trying to stay optimistic, because I am quite cynical, because I'm getting on in my years. Trying to stay optimistic, go, there are a lot of creative opportunities here as well, though. You know, where it does democratise content creation. And it mean, you know, my son's got dysgraphia, he can't draw, but now he can draw. Because he can still get stuff out of here by turning it into language and using the AI to do the drawing bit. You know, he's not going to be a cartoonist. He doesn't stop that fantastic craft skill and the creativity that goes alongside it. But it does mean offer him access to a creative outlet that he didn't have before.
Yeah. Simon, did you want to add anything to that?
I think you said quite a lot there.
Sorry, I did say.
No, it's true. I mean, it does give you access, you know, which you haven't had before. And you know, when we made the move from film to digital, you know, there were a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's not as good. It's not the same." And you know, over time, the lenses have developed, the technology has developed, so it's, you know, it's almost impossible to tell now whether something was shot on film or digital. Some purists might disagree that, you know, film is still better, but I think that you can't stop that tide of progress, and so you have to try and mitigate the worst aspects of it. And it's, you know, where it's worrying is when it becomes a quick way for lazy people to make work.
Exactly.
And I usually use Pinterest to create mood boards, and now it takes me longer because there's so much AI slop out there, and it means that I then have to, every image that comes up that looks plausible, you know, I'm then having to do a bit of research on whether it is actually real or not. Sometimes it doesn't matter, because if it gives, you know, a good flavour of what I'm looking for with the mood board, I might let it pass. But on the whole, I'm trying to avoid all kind of AI generated images. At the moment, it is pretty much CAC, and you can tell. But there will come a time where you can't, and deepfake is already there, isn't it? So I think you have to be, as a filmmaker, you know, look at what you can use to help your process. Look at the things that are useful to you and might speed it up a bit, or make it smoother, or democratize it in some way. You know, when I started filmmaking, I didn't go to film school, and I always felt quite felt imposter syndrome because of that. And there were a lot of mainly, you know, white guys who'd been to film school, and I felt quite excluded as a woman. I didn't have many role models as a director. But through kind of YouTube videos and, you know, things like Final Cut or Premiere Pro, you know, I could start to teach myself how to edit. Last year I learnt Blender, and you can start putting things together yourself without a massive budget. I've been working in VR recently as well, and you know, that's been a really steep learning curve, but I've mainly done it myself, self-taught through tutorials and things that are available for free online. And Blender is an open source software and free to use, and there are lots of others out there. So I just think that, you know, look at how you can use it in your filmmaking process, but don't lose your creativity. Just see it as a tool like Photoshop or something like that.
Sorry?
Oh, yeah, well, one thing I'd like to add to that then is actually, as a filmmaker and an artist, I think one of the important things is to know our craft and our history, and what is happening. And I'm actually quite optimistic as well, because there have always been innovations, there have always been moments where the new technology has swamped the arena. But then artists have always found ways of coming through and doing something new, and often it's maybe utilising that technology or that machine or that tool, or maybe it's not. And things others come through. What we have we're seeing is actually sort of a homogenisation of creativity. So yes, creatives can use these tools, and they can, but they're all turning out to look the same.
Yeah, that is the danger.
Yeah. And actually, you know, and I've had this personal experience recently, you know, being involved in a film, but not being the driving force behind that film. So, you know, we've actually brought in people to try and create aspects, not the actual film itself, but the marketing aspects of that film. And the creative has just gone along and tapped something into AI and then generated everything that way. So actually, what could have been a great expression of other people's work has suddenly disappeared, you know, and there would have been a great platform for that, but that's all gone. So there is a danger that, you know, by us being empowered, which is great, to then, if we don't know our field, we don't know our history, we don't know all the different genres that have brought us to this moment, if we can't draw on all that ourselves, and we're just relying on AI to go out there and draw on it for us, then we just have to accept what we're given. And as not even just as an artist, as a human being, I always rebel against that. You know, I believe we should be self-determining. You know, I don't want the government to tell me what to do in any way, shape or form. And as human beings, we should be absolutely self-determining. And as an artist, even more so. You know, because art is the expression of the consciousness, is the expression of our heart, is the expression of our, however we want to put it, it's the expression of our being. And I don't want to rely on a machine to do that for me. I don't see the point. That seems to be ridiculous, actually. So, but I think the onus is on us now to be training ourselves and helping the next generation to be aware of if you're interested in painting, learn about painting and everything else that's come from right back to painting on cave walls. If it's you know, if you love film, fantastic. I love film, but you know, learn everything, you know, because that's what will then unconsciously feed into your creativity. And we don't need to, you know, AI, of course it's here, you know, and it's brilliant. If you want correcting a voice, again, working on a recent film which was raining. The final product, you can't hear the rain because of that. We use the tool to do that. Brilliant, but that allowed us to create what we tried to create, and we overcame the obstacles that were there because we were able to use the technology. But if we can use that technology to then put that upon a wall in a gallery, which has been done, you know, and has won a prize, you know, against human beings, well, I don't know, then we're all just being lazy.
I think if it's like a Duchamp style, the artwork is the point that I've used AI, that's fine, but it's just a gimmick, isn't it?
It's just a gimmick.
One of the things I find really interesting is if you look on Instagram for proper AI artists, their work doesn't look like the AI. Because they've got that far into using it as a tool that their human mark has gone into it. And that's the photographers who went off and did new things that weren't just trying to do portraiture. And what we want is more people to understand the AI well enough to realise, actually, if you're subscribing to one of the tools where you just put a prompt in, you press a button, you're going to get dross out. Because every time you click on that link, you're telling it what's good. And lots of other people like you are telling you what's good, and it all starts looking like that. It's actually not necessarily the training that was the problem. It's the point that we're all using it to try and make the same things, and it starts looking like dross. But if you download one of the models, learn how to use the model, start fine-tuning it, maybe with your own work, play with it, you start being an artist again. You start being a creative in control of the thing, and that's quite hard. And that's where I get, with all this other stuff going on, and I think there are reasons we should hate AI in the public sphere for other reasons and stuff like that. But actually, within our creative lives, just focus on, is it useful to me? Now, it might not be. Some of us, that's actually the antithesis, if I can say it, of the way we work. But for a lot of you, actually, there's something in there. Now, it might just be a little bit of optimization, a little bit of, oh, that's really handy. You know, a great example is director Gareth Edwards made a film called The Creator recently, I think for Prime, for Amazon. He argued that he could make a film at a much lower budget by not going to a big virtual production studio, but just taking a small crew out. Now, it happens that he knows areas in certain parts of the world, in Thailand and the like, really, really well. And he was literally filming actual final shots while on the recce that he'd got some money for, because he reckoned he could make it for this small amount of money. Admittedly, he had Industry Light and Magic working on it. But he did all of his effects right at the end, which is kind of the opposite, where a lot of big budget films are going the opposite way around, where everything's green screen, you pre-produce everything, everything's previous. And he completely flipped it on his head. But the key reason he did that comes down to the camera he's using. He's using a Sony FX3, which is a $3,500 camera. Admittedly, he's using lenses that probably cost a lot more than the camera, but he's using a small camera. He comes from a documentary making background. And that camera allows you to do some really clever things. Not only is it really light, but it allows you to do some very clever things with autofocusing, which means you don't need a focus puller. He can move around. He then has the lights moving as well, so you don't have to light a whole scene, just do the scene. He's literally shooting it like a documentary, and he's able to work with a really small crew. Better environmentally friendly, you know, kind of thing. He's doing completely the opposite to the rest of the industry, but he's doing it because of one little bit of just helpful AI. And that's not really changing his creativity enough, but it is potentially putting focus pullers out of a job in the long term.
Cameraman.
Yeah, exactly. There is that kind of weird thing there, and you'll notice now, particularly in news organisations, they're all starting to use these things because you pick someone's eyeball, and it will keep the focus on that eyeball, however much you're moving around, and that is just, for him, it opens up a whole new creative process for the way he works, which is great. So there will be a bit of that as well. But I think we will get AI films that are good pretty soon. You know, we've had one a variety award at a film festival last year, and it was rubbish. It was so bad. But some people thought it was great. They thought it completely broke all the rules of filmmaking. It was the future. You know, it wasn't my taste at all. It was all shot in like it was shot through one of those heat cameras. You know, so everything's in bright colours. Yeah, very, very weird. But, you know, I think there are these two different ways you can use it. You can just use it for a bit for productivity, or you can use it really creatively. But if you're going to go for the creative, you really need to learn to use it as a tool, not just press a button and expect it to come up with something that's anything like worth seeing.
So I think off the back of a lot of where these points seem to be coming to is around the education being part of it. So I don't know if you can say a little bit about how maybe within your own organisation you see that, but if there's any sort of broader suggestions. I obviously work at the university, and AI has, you know, we've been fortunate, I think, at the University of Wales, Trinity St David, looking at it. We look at what other universities do as a model as well, and we have really pushed on kind of how we look at AI. And, you know, it's written into every assessment how AI can and can't be used, and it's a particularly tricky area. You know, we had a meeting a few months ago with people who are artists. You know, there might be printmakers, things like that, and the vibe in the room wasn't great. And these are the people who are obviously trying to teach their craft to the next generation. But I wonder, is there anything that you're doing in your organisation, or you think that maybe we could be doing that would help this educational path to not just how to use the tool, but actually the ethics and the responsibility of these tools? What maybe, you know, would be the better way, hopefully, of using them? Maybe would you, Tracy, just in terms of...
Well, we're currently starting to write a policy on AI within Film Cymru, and BFI has got a task force that are putting together, you know, reports and recommendations. And obviously, Dr. Angus Finney's report, Human in the Loop, is something that was commissioned recently. It's not published yet, which will inform a lot of the film funds across Europe, including us. And there are recommendations within that report. So I guess it's a bit early for me to say at the moment, but we are, you know, we're very well aware of it, and we're looking at how we can draw up a policy that is kind of agile, and because things are changing all the time. That's the other challenge. So I can't speak to it at the moment.
Yeah.
Watch this space.
Is it something that could become part of kind of almost like your remit, or part of what you want to do with audiences and stakeholders and groups you're working with?
I mean, there are so many different aspects of it. You know, if you're talking about the sales and marketing, for example, AI only uses historical data, and so I think it's very difficult for it to predict future trends. For example, I wonder if AI would have come up with, the success that Sinners has had recently. So I think you have to be very wary of taking too much of the data that AI puts out, like algorithms. I don't know what you all feel, but I always feel like Netflix doesn't know what I want to see at all with the recommendations. It's either stuff I've already seen or stuff that I wouldn't want to see in a million years. So I think, that you have to take all the sort of algorithms with a pinch of salt, and I at the moment, I don't think it's a replacement for the human expertise of an experienced sales agent or distributor. I think Netflix, in its commissioning process at the moment, uses 70% algorithm and 30% human gut instinct. So it would be a sad day when it becomes 100% the algorithm, in my mind.
Just off the back of that, there's a tool called Synalytic who claim that they've compared their success rate at greenlighting film pitches, and they beat human commissioners by quite high rates. But the reason they're beating them probably is because they're not commissioning the ones that do really badly. So it's bringing up the level, but it's not spotting the new opportunities at all. And so you're always going to have that. And I think, I didn't know that Netflix had that kind of mixed thing, but I think the kind of mixed concept is quite an interesting one with that. Nesta called it collective intelligence, and it's kind of this idea that we go along with the AI shouldn't have been intelligent on its own, is a tool, and we're always using it and going along with it. In terms of Media Cymru, it's interesting that we do some training courses, and we do sort of more awareness raising kind of events. And generally, it's virtual production and AI are always the ones with most people. I do quite like training on it, and I can say to anyone in the room, if you want to get in touch with me on LinkedIn, I'm funded to be able to give support on if you're thinking of using AI in something and you've got a particular idea or a particular concept for how you to do it, where we offer business support. So we basically just say, well, how would you do this? Is it a massive thing? Is it a small thing? Is it something you could do on your own, or do you need to go to somebody else? So I can actually just get me on LinkedIn, and I can give you an hour of my time. And that's part of the support we're actually offering, is more about that. Where are the edges where AI fits well? And it fits well with the user need, with what people actually want to do with it, not generally. It should definitely not be AI for AI's sake. In terms of training, it is more challenging because we do need to still teach all the old skills, and the history and all those sorts of things, so that you can recognise AI is really biased. I get a lot of TV production companies that are wanting to use AI for reenactments and things, whether it be true crime or some historic element, where they're going, we just don't have the budget in a documentary to do this. So they're trying to use it for something that it's not replacing anything. This is something they wouldn't be able to do. And they go, we're going to do it for this, and it's an Edwardian scene. I'm going, yeah, great, we can use AI to create our environment, and then we're going to have an actor dressed like this. And okay, how do you know the AI is creating the right environment? Because it's probably learned what it's doing off some other period dramas from all over the world that have got really weird views on what an English period drama should be, and plus making a whole load of stuff up, because it will make things up if you. Yeah. I feel sorry for it sometimes. I say, it's like it has to answer you. We ask it really stupid questions, then we get really upset with it because it gives us a stupid answer. If you want it to do anything factual, give it the facts and then let it interpret them. Don't expect it to know them. It doesn't. It doesn't know them.
Yeah,
it's really
the
awful.
art of the prompt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, always prompt it with lots of context. If you're doing visual stuff, lots of visual references that you have copyright for, because the easiest way of breaching someone's copyright is the stuff you put in. You're much more likely to than the stuff that's already in there. And I don't want to go into that because that's a whole other area. I could go into the why the copyright is different in those different instances. But definitely, we want people to go out there and use it for useful things. And it is challenging because students need to be using it, but they need to recognise where we're coming from, how biased it is. And unless you teach them all the rest of it, they don't realise it's biased. And it is really biased, but in some very subtle ways that you wouldn't notice. You know, you will end up with archetypes in your films if you started using it, and you wouldn't even notice the people in the background, you know. And there's also leakage you get where other characters start looking like the one character. So you go, I'm going to train on this character, so this character's consistent, and everyone else starts having a beard as well, or, you know, looks like Hinterland, everyone's got beards. So that's kind of often a problem. But I don't know, how you teach students that, while also being really open to it, while also allowing for the point that universities probably need to start having deals with specific AI tools so students aren't having to pay directly. It's a big challenge. But probably the biggest challenge is for us who are a bit older, because we have to keep on going, oh, we have to learn this stuff as well. Or is my pension going to be there?
For you, Simon, in terms of like the awareness raising, I suppose, of the issues and education around it?
Well, I think that, you know, it's interesting you say we have to use these things. I disagree entirely. We don't need to use them at all if we don't want to. And the fact is, you know, just from my own journey making films and learning about films and things like this, you know, if it was all going to be about bias and what's has to be popular and what's trending, you know, I would never have come across Paul Sharratt or Brackage or any of these people. And you know, they've influenced me throughout my entire filmmaking career, and I love them. But you know, if it hadn't been for a particular lecturer in the university who just said, "Oh, do you know? Have you seen this?" You know, my whole world would have been completely different. My whole life would have been completely different. So you know, and that's not down to AI. That's down to, you know, the people going out there and being creative and using whatever technology, you know, and it could be anything. So I'm still not convinced. I'm a Luddite. I'm sorry. You know, and I believe.
I kind of agree with you. I mean, lately, I started off being quite enthusiastic about what it could do. But lately, in my own work, I've almost kind of gone completely the other way of thinking. Just going to be quite analogue and handmade.
Which may be the right way to go for a while. We still don't know whether people will turn away from it in their cultural needs, because it does look very samey and because it's too easy almost. It kind of spoon feeds you this stuff all the time. But yeah, I always think if it's useful for your creative practice, use it. I wouldn't put a line because it's AI, because there's loads of people who won't be blocking it for that reason, and they'll all start getting the work.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because they are optimising the process. And frankly, we're all using AI all the time.
No, that's fine.
You know, everyone was really scared of biometrics 10 yeurs ago, and now most of you can't open your phone without using biometrics.
Sure.
And biometrics is a proper privacy issue kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
And yet we all kind of, it's useful. If anything, my worry is it becomes too mundane and we forget to use it properly.
I suppose that if you're a certain way into the creative process, you know, because I don't think it doesn't replace the emotional, the cultural connection. You know, if you go to a location, you might see something that wouldn't be captured on LiDAR or, you know, in 360. There might be something, you know, the smell of it or the feel of it or the textures or a memory that it evokes, or, you know, serendipity. You might meet someone there who sparks an idea, you know, go down a different avenue. So that AI can't replace that. AI doesn't have emotions, you know, and doesn't even have an opinion. It just regurgitates what is out there already.
It's a really interesting point, and I don't know if he's in the audience, but someone told me a story last night of a filmmaker who's here, and his film is in the festival this year, and there was a shot. He was just out filming, and there was a cat that was just walking along the wall, and apparently it walked out along the wall, looked straight in the camera, and turned around and walked down the wall again, disappeared. You know, and having seen the film, it's a film called The Salesman, and having seen that film, it's a brilliant part of that film. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic, and it really fits and makes the film. And he was made the choice to make sure it was there, but it was a happy accident.
Yeah.
You're not going to get that ever with AI.
I'm going to really play devil's advocate now. I was playing devil's advocate all the time, but that's one of the things I enjoy about AI, is the happy accidents.
Yeah,
Right.
you can.
But
I actually use image. I'm mainly image generation, but I use it instead of, my partner will be playing Candy Crush. When you're second screening in front of the TV, which everyone does nowadays, and I just making images, because once in a while it will twist something in a certain way, and you go, now how do I bring that back into it? The thing is, I know a lot about the tool, so I can bring that back into it. Most people are just using the off-the-wall ones. You can't. But there is some, that it's the most thrill I've got out of creativity since I was in art college, is actually playing with AI. Which is, it's a bizarre thing, and I actually think it is creative. It's doing the same process we're doing.
But that's the tool. It's not creative. The human being.
No,
who
I'm
chooses
deciding it's art.
Right,
I would say
that's
the
the
difference, isn't it?
Exactly.
And I'm not just going, that one's good.
Yeah.
I'm going, I like this bit about this bit, I like this bit, and then going down loops and loops and loops.
Yeah.
But it
That's
does give
like
you that kind of happy accident thing,
No,
just
that's
about.
fine.
Yeah.
Happy
Like
accident can be any tool.
generator,
Yeah,
isn't
exactly.
it? You might get two images that you would never put together otherwise, but yeah, I don't think that's you.
Yeah, and that's my practice.
Choosing.
It is down to your creative practice,
Yeah.
isn't it?
But in the end of the day, creativity is about, and that what makes human beings different to animals, is the fact that we can perceive something abstractly, and then we can manifest it. And that is the creative process, and that feels to me is where we're beginning to start to sacrifice. All the powers that be in the institutions, be it the educational, be it governmental, be it whatever it is, are saying, oh no, that's fine. That bit's not important. Well, to me, that is the most important.
That's the age-old dilemma, isn't it? That the creator has never had enough power and control.
Sure.
We've always been
Up the revolution.
the sway of,
It's also, you could see it in another way of looking at it, it's this productization of the craft.
Right.
So the person does the craft, it's the creative process, and slowly it stops being a creative process. And it stops being a craft because it gets productised.
Right, and
and it gets turned into a mass media.
Of course, and that's not new. Philip K. Dick was writing about that in the 60s. So, that's not new. Of course, but this is an ongoing process, and at some point, we can say no. We don't have to keep saying yes and say, oh, just because it's happened. No, we can say, well, we're going to go and do something else. You go and play with your AI over there. I'm going to go and do this.
Yeah.
Then that's our choice.
I think for me it's the conscious decision making, the awareness, and not sort of sleepwalking into it because AI is printed on everything. We're being pushed it as this great thing. There's lots of, as we've heard over the last hour or so, a lot of discussion around it, a lot of perspectives on it, and I think that's going to be one of the key things is making sure people are aware of what they're looking at or how they're using it. I'm very conscious of time. We are coming up towards the end. This has been fantastic. That's why time has flown. I think there's so much to say on the subject. But I wanted to just see, does anybody in the audience have any questions that they want to ask the panel in particular, or points that they want to bring up from their own experience? We've got a young man at the back there.
I'm in my last year of GCSEs now. I'm going into college and I'm an aspiring writer and director. Basically my question is, how can I make sure that I don't encounter AI with my clientele or like some such? Because I have strong opinions on AI. I believe that the moment I believe there's a line between what other people have created, which is obviously AI, versus what we create, and I believe that as soon as that line is blurred, I believe that's at the point when it becomes a question: is this too much? Is it like I'm very conscious about it, as well as I believe it removes some of the craft that we put into it. Obviously, like Simon says, as humans, we are very abstract, and I want to make sure that doesn't get lost, especially since further down the line I will be venturing into this field, and I don't want to. Basically, that's it.
It's great that you're thinking about it. That's the first thing that as we've been saying, isn't it? Is you do need to think about it. And I think that for some people, and it comes down to your practice, what you want your practice to be. I found one really interesting way of using just ChatGPT, and this is exactly on this line. It's where does this sit on that line? Is you can train it to be a character, and it will talk to you as that character. Now, you could spend quite a long time writing that character, and if you were writing a novel, that might be, there's different ways of structuring novels, but you might start with your characters, and you write a huge amount of backstory. But you can give ChatGPT the backstory and just talk to it for hours. And it will come up with things that you never would have thought it's saying, the happy accidents. And actually, I found it really interesting because it's less biased than I am. If I ask it to be a Texan 14-year-old girl, it actually knows more about Texan 14-year-old girls than I do. It'll use idioms and things that are less stereotypical than I'll use, providing I know that's what I'm doing. And I found that really interesting as a way of just creating those things that bring something more to life that's slightly outside my area of thing. But I'm probably picking up a load of other biases. And I'm starting to use AI. So I am going down that slippery slope, and I can see why you're saying you need to draw that line. So, yeah, perhaps you should just stick to your guns and draw the line. But it can be used, and it's being, there I am using it in a very structured way, thinking about how I work with it. And this was actually accidental. I was doing it for students. And we used to just, literally, you get your phone out and just talk to the Scarlett Johansson voice, and just go, I want you to play my girlfriend, and I forgot to come to our date last night. And she comes up with some great things to go back at you. I mean, you can tell they train it on Reddit. It can be really acerbic. And that actually can be really useful, but you have to develop the skills to be able to spot when it's saying something that is really original, that resonates with the emotions, that does all those things. And that you have to learn, and maybe you have to learn that by actually just really writing lots of stuff yourself, and seeing lots of stuff. And understanding how Jack Thorne writes so that you know why his films, all these things look the way they do. And so I don't have an answer of how. I just think you're making the right. It's right to be thinking about that. Do I use it? If I use it, I'm using it for a very particular project to learn. I'm not just letting it creep into all my work. And
who do you see as your clientele? Who do you see as your clientele?
Well, I'm actually very, very later on, maybe 10 years down. I'm looking to maybe start a business in this. I want to be a director more than anything. I could be a writer if I really wanted to, but I don't think I want to go down that route just yet. But I'm not. Obviously, I'm only 16. I'm not too up to date with how the legalities and the more business side of it. All I know is that I just want to create, and I know if I put my all into it, I believe I do have potential to make what I want to happen. The clientele in question, I think, would probably be producers. If I hire any producers, if I hire any actors or some such, I'm not sure how that would work. But
I mean, I would say to any emerging new filmmakers to learn everything you can. Learn the analogue, handmade ways of doing stuff, the basic things, but also learn the tools that are coming in, that are around us, because the more skills you have, the more tools in your toolbox, the greater chance you have of being, employed or making the things yourself. It as we said earlier, it can democratize the filmmaking process. It makes things cheaper and more easy for you to do yourself. But also look at how would you tell this story? How would you direct this piece of work if you didn't have any of that? If you just had your camera, your phone, if you're just doing it through photographs, for example, just look at all different ways of making the work and find the one that speaks to you the most.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
There's somebody waiting patiently in the back there. Did you have your hand up to ask a question? No?
Yeah, sort of. I was more just thinking out loud. But is it a natural conclusion in the future for the industry as a whole? I'm wondering what you feel about this, that we're going down the route where a human-made film, as it were, just becomes the artisan, and we're relying on the audience base who value sourdough bread as opposed to bread from a shop. Do you know what I mean? Is that a natural conclusion to where you think?
I think we already have that in a way. You know, Mark Jenkin makes his films on 16mm and processes them himself, and will put, you know, artificially put grain in there, or, you know, uses seawater in the developing of it, or we're working with Jeannie Findlay at the moment, who's doing a documentary about the decline of the fishing industry, and she's planning on using some of the polluted seawater to develop the film as well. So I think we already have that kind of artisan sort of approach to filmmaking, and then you've got, you know, big budget Hollywood films which use a lot of CGI and special effects, and even AI now. I think it was The Brutalist, wasn't it, that said they'd used AI for some of their scenes. So I guess I hope that it's not going to be all taken over, and, you know, there's no audience left for the more artisan films. I think if, you know, if it goes as things have gone, that they will run alongside each other, and we've got, you know, immersive projects now which use all different techniques all together at the same time. So yeah, I guess, as I said before, I think we have to look at the opportunities but mitigate the worst side of it as far as we can.
And it may be that it's AI that changes into something else in terms of the AI filmmaking, because, you know, like I was saying about live dialogue, you know, it's kind of an interesting way of playing with character dialogue. You can just do live dialogue direct to the set-top box. So you can build worlds and create simulations in which stories unfold, and those stories can be completely personalised potentially. Now, you have to have a very big brain to work that out and have the creative vision to do it, because it's really complicated still having something, because you still need a vision behind that sort of thing. But it might be that actually moves it away from what we would see as the I sit down for this period of time, that has got my 100% attention. Because we don't do that a lot anymore, you know, and so I think you will find that actually it will carry on. You know, newspapers were seen as, oh, newspapers will kill cinema. You know, well, we don't think about that much now because we forget that most of your news was consumed from the cinema. But you know, yeah, but there have been these changes, and I can't say we're still. You know, I went to a Gregorian chant thing the other week. You know, we're talking about music form that's like 500 years old.
I guess my worry, my worry with the examples we use to cite how these new technologies have come in the past and completely changed the industry, which is a natural part of progress. I think, you know, obviously what we're seeing now is completely unprecedented in its scope of how it's going to affect everything. It's not just going to have an effect on the printmakers, which obviously had effects other ways as well. But like this could, as you said, like, if it was done wrong and in the wrong hands, it could eradicate so many things and like the entire industry in a certain way. And I guess this isn't a question, just a personal worry. My worry, I guess, is that the historical examples you have for how it changed industries, the technological advances changed industries, kind of don't have the same level of comfort for me now, in the sense that this one is unprecedented.
So I'm not completely convinced. I think we all see history from the point of time we're at, so we all think it's the most extreme. I think the idea that you could suddenly tell truth with a camera completely changed culture. Culture up to that point had been defined by the richest person who got the portrait made that had lots of things in it that said they were a certain sort of person. And that was the bit that we now know as history, with the portraits, the books. They weren't that person. They were commissioning all that. It was all false. It was all lies. And suddenly you had this idea of the camera, that the camera doesn't lie. Now, of course, it lied pretty quickly. Stalin started rubbing people out of photographs, like, you know, two decades later. But I think that was as big a moment, given the technology of the time. And they had loads of other stuff going on, telegrams, all these sort of other things were going on. So they probably felt really like, oh my God, this technology age, it's so scary. And I also think it will take a while for some of these things to actually hit as much as we think they'll hit. Because if you really get into the AI, it really isn't as good as you think it is.
No, but I think that there is a big issue with documentary film now, and you know what's true. And as you say, it's obviously come up in the past, but I think even more now, it's almost impossible to tell when you're watching something on social media if it's actually real or not. And it's when they had that earthquake in, was it Indonesia or Malaysia recently? I saw footage of it and I thought, oh, is that AI or did that really happen? You know, and that was my immediate thought, and that is a big concern now, I think.
Yeah. But it is that it's destroying truth in a different way, but we've only got that model of truth from the camera. And so we're going through that change. And that change will be painful. I'm not saying it isn't. It's very painful if you're working in certain bits of the industry. But we saw all of this with social media as well. Social media decimated journalism. We kind of forget that.
It was more just like the actual job.
Yeah.
Of everyone. That's more, I think, truth as a whole. You know, we didn't have anywhere else for that.
I'm getting a nod that we need to wrap because of time. But I think, you know, are you happy? Are you around for a little bit? Are you happy to discuss kind of points with people? Yeah. I think there's some questions that would seem to be coming up as well. So if that's possible, is there anything you want to say in closing? Any kind of from your standpoint, what we need to be thinking about going forward? Anything just to close, really?
Just to keep the human in the loop.
It's very good. I've been using that phrase a lot. I didn't know that it was in the Cineregio report. My feeling is that you can't control something unless you understand it. So that's why I spend, you know, I come across as an advocate here, but actually my role has always been to look at something and decide what's good, what's bad, what do we want, what do we don't want. You know, I did it at the BBC for years, with whatever technology came along. And it's the same position now. There's lots of stuff I don't like about it, but I just think learn enough about it to know not to be so scared of it, because I think there's almost too much fear in some instances, and we need to fight the right wars, if you like, fight the right battles.
For you, Simon, I think.
Yeah, I've probably come from a slightly different angle again, but because, you know, who does society serve? You know, in the end of the day, I don't think we should be keeping human beings in the loop. You know, we should be creating that loop, and we should be the ones that are governing that. Unfortunately, all of our systems are swayed by those that have either money. We talk about, you know, the camera tell truth. Well, actually, since the invention of camera, governments have been using it to tell whatever narrative they want to. So that's still going on. And now they have deep fake, they have all of these different things. So it's important that we as individuals empower ourselves, inform ourselves, and remain clear with critical thinking to, yes, so these things exist, but we don't have to accept them. And as artists, we are key in that conversation, because, you know, we are the ones that are expressing that abstract and critical thinking all of the time. And differently, we might not, no matter what our experience is, it comes and it's expressing. So it doesn't matter, we may not like what someone's saying, we may not agree with what someone's saying, but it doesn't mean that shouldn't, you know, have its expression, and it's in its expression, and we can then decide what happens from that. So, you know, I think we are important in this conversation, and we don't have to accept just because it's there and because people are telling us, be it our overlords, that this is what has to happen. We don't have to do that. We have our creativity. We've been around a lot longer, you know, than what's presently going on. And, you know, you can go right back to the printing press and whatever, and there have always been these major changes. But the artist and the expression, the creative, has always been there. And also, the genius has always come to the top. You know, at the moment, we're just expecting people to say, I want this to sound like Stephen King, or I want this to look like George Lucas. Well, what space does that give us for those people of the future? You know, if we're going to rely on a machine just telling us what we have to create. No, we shouldn't. No, we should, and our education should be about empowering the creativity, not learning tools. The tools are there to serve us, not the other way around.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really good way to finish, and food for thought for, I think, all the filmmakers here. So thank you very, very much for your contributions.